All right, we'll call the meeting to order. Everyone ready? Welcome to the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting for Thursday, July 19, 2018. We get started by calling roll. My name's Sean Hutchinson. I'm the chair. Vice Chairman Jeff Nelson, he is not here tonight. Secretary Jay Atluski.
Present.
Member Brian Patterson.
Present.
Member Linda Grice is not in today, and neither is Member Clay Alsop. Member Joanne Acondi. All right, we have a quorum tonight, and we'll get things started by reading an opening statement. This commission is composed of Peoria citizens who have been appointed by the City Council to serve on the commission as a civic responsibility without compensation. Our duty is to study and review planning and zoning issues within the city of Peoria. The commission hears zoning cases, holds public hearings, or may conduct a study session on a topic. Decisions made by the commission are forwarded as written recommendations to the City Council, who take the final action. All hearings are conducted in accordance with the Rules of Procedures and Robert's Rules of Order. Each case will be called in the order which appears on the agenda unless otherwise announced during the meeting. In the interest of maintaining a fair and efficient hearing, the commission adheres to the following steps. The chair will call a case. City staff will then provide a brief report and recommendation. Applicant is then invited to give a presentation. Then any member of the public may provide testimony. Testimony is limited to 3 minutes. When we call your name, please come up to the podium and provide your name and address. After all the testimony has been taken, we will invite the applicant back up to provide any rebuttal or final statements. Finally, we will have commission discussion and a decision. Anyone wishing to speak must complete a speaker's request form and hand it to the assistant on my left. Please be as brief as possible and do not repeat statements already made by others. Any member of the public may appeal to the City Council the decisions of the Commission regarding conditional use permits. The appeal must be submitted in writing to the Planning and Community Development Department within 15 calendar days of the date of the Commission's decision. All Commission recommendations on public hearing items, including general plan amendments, rezones, zoning code amendments, and special plans, move forward to a regular City Council meeting. The City Council will then act on the recommendation of the Commission. The City Council may concur with the decision. They may modify it, overturn it, or remand it back to the Commission for further consideration. We welcome citizens' comments, and as fellow citizens of Peoria, we thank you in advance for your participation. Okay, that being said, we have the final call to submit speaker request forms. If there is still people who would care to speak on any agenda item, please do submit. All right, we are going to move on to the consent agenda. All items listed on the consent agenda are considered to be routine or have been previously reviewed by the Commission and will be enacted in one motion. Tonight we have one item on the consent agenda. That is the minutes. Discussion and possible action to approve the minutes of the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting held on June 7, 2018. Do I have a motion on the minutes?
And Mr. to approve the consent agenda.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on the minutes. Anything further under discussion? All in favor? Go ahead and vote. So the meetings. Okay, and that passes unanimously. Okay, we'll move on to the regular agenda. We have up for discussion and consideration item 2R. That is Z 17-32 Haciendas at White Peak. A request to rezone approximately 60 acres from Suburban Ranch, SR 43, to Haciendas at White Peak planned area development in order to develop 152 single-family homes located east of the northeast corner of 139th Avenue and Ridgeline Road. And staff, you are up.
Good evening, Chair Hutchinson, members of the Commission. My name is Randy Proch. I will be presenting tonight's item, Haciendas at White Peak. This is case C 1732. This is a rezoning request. The request this evening is being represented by Withy Morse and is located in the northwest section of the city, just beyond Trilogy West, Trilogy at Vistancia, and Vistancia itself. This is a larger look at the overall area. I'll bring that in for you. This request does not have a formal plat or home builder attached to the proposal at this time. This is only for entitlement of the land with specific standards set forth through a planned area development I will discuss in more detail later. Currently, this site is zoned Suburban Ranch 43. This is part of a very large annexation that was done in 2010 of 640 acres. Last year, we had a smaller proposal, somewhat similar to this, which is located at the southeast corner of Dysart Road and Ridgeline. It is labeled as PAD. That was Snoren Place. There's been a large amount of interest in this area, and we're anticipating additional proposals being brought forward to it in the near future. Immediately surrounding the site is SR 43 in all four directions to the north, south, east, and west. The request is to rezone the property from SR 43 to Haciendas at White Peaks planned area development. This proposal would be for 152 lots at a density of 2.5 dwelling units to the acre. This area of the city is, general plan designation is low density residential, which is a range of 2 to 5 with a target of 3, so this is actually under the target density. Now, the proposal shown for you as far as the lotting goes is conceptual in nature. They have acknowledged some of the requests and direction we have been headed as far as curvilinear streets, shorter block lengths, and really helping acknowledge the existing wash conditions that traverse the site. But again, there isn't a plat submittal at this time, so this should be considered conceptual. Additionally, this applicant is providing internal street connections. You can see in all four corners of the site, there are 2 5-acre pieces to the west, and there is a 10-acre piece to the east. So we do anticipate these coming forward at a later date through a separate entitlement process, but be part of the overall development, hence what you can see as far as these would be connected internally instead of having to go back out to the arterial roadway network. Now you'll notice there are 2 roadway networks shown on this slide. The red that underlines the gray is our existing circulation plan that's within our general plan. The roadway shown in gray is a alternative solution should the property to the south not want to come forward. Again, the proposal this evening has no timeline as far as development, so our anticipation is that the development immediately to the south will have a coordination effort with the landowners represented this evening by Withy Morris. The staff memo provided ahead of this meeting is a small addition of language to stipulation 4 of the staff report, and that's to help clarify roadway dedications for Ridgeline Road, which is the roadway you see at the southern border of this proposal. As displayed, Haciendas at White Peak is showing 45 feet of right-of-way within their parcel and 45 feet of right-of-way within the parcel to the south. Now, as part of this proposal for fire safety and proper ingress and egress to the site, they are required to build a full roadway. What that entails is a median 2, which indicates 2 lanes of travel in each direction with a raised curb median. This is to help mass egress in case of emergency. Should something occur on one side of the street, the opposite direction of travel is still available to route traffic. And again, that's in the worst case scenario. The staff memo, to circle back to that, is a clarification of stipulation 4 to allow ongoing discussions between the 2 landowners to determine where the final roadway placement will be. Now, should the southern properties not move forward when Haciendas would like to move forward, that 90 feet of road would need to be contained entirely within their parcel. The stipulation language that was added is to ensure that the final right-of-way dedications will occur prior to the final plat approval. Meaning, should Haciendas at White Peak move forward and create individual lots for sale, the roadway network and the tracks. At that time, either the roadway will be wholly contained within their property, or there will be an agreement worked out and submitted to the city in order to construct 45 feet of right-of-way on both parcels. The development plan is as follows. Our natural open space is 22%. This is above the city's requirement of 15%. There are two lot sizes in the 6,000 square foot range and 8,000 square foot range, respectively. There are enhanced entry points along Ridgeline Road and has internal connections for future development to the adjacent parcels to the west and east. There are two amenity areas proposed and as described within the Standards and Guidelines report, with a usable open space of 16%, which is well above our standard of 9% for lots of this size. Additionally, the wash corridors are preserved except for a DG path that would traverse alongside the embankment for recreational use. And lastly, but possibly most helpful for development in this area, areas in North Peoria don't tend to be as flat as areas in South Peoria, so there have been modifications to the city's wall standards through their Standards and Guidelines report as part of their planned area development, and that's to avoid large areas of cut and fill. So if there has to be a larger wall, we certainly understand that to help not disturb as much grade. This is a standards comparison of the city's zoning districts of R16 and R18, nearly identical in most ways except for a few changes which I have bolded. The minimum lot width for the city's R16 is 50 feet. The proposal would bump that to 53 feet, and the depth minimum from 100 to 115 feet. Additionally, there would be a small allowance for additional lot coverage of up to 50% instead of 45%. Moving over to the R18, similar in most ways, except the lot width would decrease from 70 feet to 65 feet, but the depth would be the same as the other lot size from 100 to 115 feet. Additionally, these lots would allow up to 50% lot coverage. Notice of application, notice of hearing postcards were mailed out to residents within 1,320 feet of the site. Now, this is different than what you probably have heard a lot lately. Because the site is above 40 acres, that radius does increase from 600 feet to a quarter mile, or 1,320. And this was sent to all homeowners associations within a 1 mile radius. This site was posted in accordance with the city requirements, and in fact, it was located as close as possible to existing residential. This site is somewhat isolated from the existing roadway network and existing homes, so they were able to place the sign slightly closer so that it was able to be seen by public. We did have a neighborhood meeting on June 4th, 2018 at the Cross of Glory Lutheran Church. We had one member of public attend. It was a church staff member that lived in the area and wanted to know more. We had a second member of public attend looking for information about home prices and model homes, and unfortunately we had to turn them away as this development's not quite there yet. To date, we have not received any support or opposition, and the developer has executed a developer assistance agreement, a DAA, with the Peoria Unified School District, which would serve this site. Our findings and recommendation for you this evening on item 2R are that the development is consistent with the general plan land use designation of low density residential, which again has a target of 3. This proposal is at 2.5. And this proposal is consistent with the zoning and development patterns in the general vicinity, which would include Trilogy West and Sonoran Place and the immediate surroundings. Our request for you this evening is to recommend approval of case Z1732 to City Council, and that would be subject to the conditions outlined in the staff report and the staff memo provided to you this evening. With that, I will take any questions.
Okay, before we open a public hearing, is there any questions for staff about this case? All good? Okay, we will open the public hearing then. Would the applicant like to make a presentation? And please state your name and address for the record.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, Benjamin Tate with Withy Morris, 2525 East Arizona Biltmore Circle, on behalf of the applicant. What I've learned from my last few trips to Peoria is that staff does such a thorough and excellent job of making the presentation that I will try to be as brief as possible and really just tell the story that the applicant has. I have also noticed that we are the only action item on tonight's agenda, so I'll try to avoid being the kid in class that asks the long question and keeps everybody for an extended period of time. As far as telling the story, it's really simple here. What the applicant seeks to do here is entitle a site for a future home builder to give a product, a housing product, and a development that is commensurate in the quality and the density of the existing developments in the area. So we can move forward. So as Randy said, this site is 60 acres. It's off of the southwest corner of the alignments of Dixoletta and 135th Avenue in Peoria. It's zoned SR 143, which is, as most of you know, tends to be a placeholder zoning designation when it's annexed from the county. These 1 acre lots aren't really commensurate with the development that's existing in the area. And what White Peak seeks to build is to add value to the area with 152 lots, 6,000 square feet and 8,000 square feet, breaking down into 58 lots of the 58 lots of the 60 by 125 and 94 lots of the 53 by 120. As Randy noted, this is on par with what the general plan has designated for this area, 2 to 5 units per acre, target with density of 3 units per acre. We're coming in just under that at 2.5 units per acre. You can just move to the next one. So this is the site plan and landscape plan for the area. So one of the things that's unique to this site that you don't often see in developments that have existing wash corridors like this is that the site plan actually incorporates the wash corridors into the development rather than trying to divert drainage away from the existing washes. And what that creates is sort of a unique natural barrier between the two neighborhoods that they're trying to build. So you have the 8,000 square foot lots on one side and the 6,000 square foot lots on the other, with DG trails, decomposed granite trails running along them to create a really nice amenity when the site is eventually developed. Along with, as you can see, there's an east park down in the southeast corner of the site, and then a west park over on the southwest corner of the site to create some additional amenities for the eventual homeowners. And there you see is actually the breakdown of the lots that will exist. So you have 58 of the larger lots on the left, and then 94 of the 6,000 square foot lots on the east side of the property. What I noted is that this development is commensurate with the existing developments in the area. So to our west, you do have Trilogy West. Their development comes in at about 2.82 units per acre, so slightly less dense than what we're proposing. To the southwest of us is Sonoran Place, also slightly higher density of 3.08 units per acre. And then there was also Granite Hills. They withdrew their application, but that will likely come back at some point, and they were proposing 3.59 units per acre. So this development is slightly less dense than everything else that's existing in the area, simply trying to create a product that's on par with what is existing and what is going to be developed in the future. And that's just, there's another slide of the same presentation, and that's all I have. I wanted to keep it brief and open it up for any questions.
All right, well, thank you. Is there any questions for the applicant? Commissioner Condi?
How deep do you expect the backyards to be?
That is actually a good question. So the minimum lot depth that we're proposing is 115 feet for the smaller lots and 120 feet for the larger lots. And so when you factor that in,
Oh, here it says 120 and 125 on the schematic.
so those lots, there's a knuckle that creates a little bit shallower of a depth, but the larger lots that don't have that will be 125 feet.
Okay. So according to the zoning, you can have a backyard 15 feet. Right? 15
Chair
feet.
Hutchinson, Commissioner Condi, yes, through the Standards and Guidelines report, which is the underlying zoning, the minimum would be 115 feet through zoning. Again, there is no plat at this time, so
I know, that's why I'm asking it now, because that is, and I will say, I am incredibly opposed to anyone building houses with 15-foot backyards. And the reason is, especially out in this area, what I have seen develop is backyards that don't have room enough for a tree. And you don't have a tree, you don't have any shade. And what people do is they just leave it or they put it into desert, and builders build 2-story houses in order to cram them in. And then you have no tree, and you have stucco houses and block walls and rock landscaping, and it becomes a heat island. And even though the builder sells them the first time, the second and third time, that neighborhood doesn't increase in value, it stagnates or it grows. It stops. And we have hundreds of developments that are like this. It's like building an inner city out in the middle of area that has all sorts of possibilities. And then you have 50-foot wide lots, and you put in a 20-foot garage, and 20 feet across if you have an entry, so it becomes one of those long, narrow houses, 8 feet on one side and 5 feet on the other. And so you have houses that are so close together, you can't put trees in the side yard. And so as a result, you end up having a lot of heat, and yes, it sounds great. You have, a small number of houses per acre, but a lot of it, what you're doing is you cram the houses in. I'm not saying you, I'm saying developers cram the houses in because it's easier for them and cheaper for them to build close together and leave open areas. And it looks really nice when it starts, but it doesn't end up nice down the road. And 15 feet is not deep enough for a backyard. It should be 20, 25. You have a 20-foot setback in the front. You have almost no side yards because they're smashed together. You have no backyard. And yeah, it fits all the zoning. We are looking over the general plan. It's been done over and over and over and over and over and over again. And that doesn't mean it's right, and that doesn't mean it's for the future. So I'm glad that it's here before you've developed the plat, because I would like to see wider lots, fewer lots, better homes, bigger homes, make your money in the size of the homes, and have less infrastructure. I mean, that means there are less homes that we have to provide infrastructure for, and make it a more upscale area.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Planning Commissioner Condi. Jason Morris with E. Morris. You raised some excellent points, and none of the comments that you're making are unfair as you talk about, philosophically, the development of this area. I would point out, and you've mentioned in your comments, we're below the target density. This area, and one of the things that we're very proud of with this land use plan, and please bear in mind, this hasn't been done in a vacuum. It's been done with the help of staff. It's been done in consultation with council and mayor and also the neighborhood, so that no one should be surprised as to what's being developed and the lot size that's being anticipated. And as was pointed out by Mr. Tate, in large parts, this is commensurate with what we see in the Trilogy area and what's being proposed immediately surrounding us. That said, your comment philosophically is accurate about what we expect. It's been my experience, having done this for 25 years in planning and zoning, that it's not the lot size that drives the quality. It's the construction, it's the ownership, and it's the management of the community. And I can take you to extraordinarily large lots. I can show you acre lot communities that you would not want to have as part of the Peoria landscape. And I can show you much smaller lots than what we're proposing here that are million-dollar homes because of the location, because of the design, because of the livability, and because of the amenities. So what we've tried to do with this particular land plan, as you can see, is to keep those block lengths short so you don't have a sea of similarness within the community. We've also shown areas that could have been, for want of a better term, gridded out in a more typical pattern. We've kept the washes, and to some degree that's also a matter of the development pattern and what needs to be done in this area. But there are areas where we have decided to keep the openness of the community. And that's resulted, unlike the majority of what you see in new development, even in this area, as you drive by this community, I think you're going to see, based upon our land plan, about half a dozen lots at any given time in the longest row of lots from the arterial roadway, which is very unusual. Typically, you will see the backs of homes as you go through arterials, and even though we're well buffered and we're creating a landscape plan that we're quite proud of, this is an extraordinarily sensitive design. As you look at the backyards, you've seized upon our smallest lot, and even those, that the product type that we're looking at with these lots would still permit about a 20-foot backyard at a minimum, even though the zoning category would permit a 15-foot backyard. And given the 5 and 8 and 5 and 10 side yards, you still have livability. The last point I'd mention, Madam Planning Commissioner, is the type of resident of this community isn't going into this community without understanding exactly what it is that they're purchasing, because to some degree it is a lifestyle choice. This community offers a tremendous amount of open space, which is going to be amenitized. So these are going to be active trails with active amenities within that open space, meaning that somebody who may have the desire to live within this community is not looking to take care of and maintain a large backyard. And it may not be just decomposed granite. That's certainly something that could be done. Again, I think it's much more likely, based upon the price of housing in this area, that you would have a little oasis in your backyard. It may not be the North 40, but it will be very well designed and very usable. And I use an example, my mother, who lives in a community almost identical to this and has a small backyard. Again, it's probably 18 feet, but it's all well utilized, well maintained, and well landscaped. It is a usable area, and fortunately within her community like this, there are common areas where the vast majority of the community takes advantage of that area. So I understand where you're coming from, and I understand your concerns, but I've seen, it's not the size of the lot, it's not the size of the backyard, it's what's being done with it.
I would like to say that you pose some good arguments, except that I'm a real estate appraiser. I have seen hundreds of houses like this. I've seen hundreds of houses, if not thousands, that have started out this way. And with all the best intentions,
Certainly.
with all the idea, I can see some lots here that do back to open space. But in the beige area, in parcel A, I see a lot of them backing to each other, and along whatever it is, Public Street 1, or where the 53 is, they're going to be, and up there where they're backing to each other, and those 15-foot backyards are going to be very shallow for those people. And it does in some extent, I'm not talking about the quality of the construction, because it can be good, bad, whatever. I'm talking about what's going to happen in the future and the perception. And I feel that the 65 by 25 is acceptable. I am not in favor of the 53 by 120 with 15-foot setbacks and 5 and 13 on the side and long, narrow houses. I live in a long, narrow house, and I live on a lake, and I have lots of amenities, and I can tell you what happens to the neighborhoods after 30 years, and it doesn't get better many times as fast as other areas where the houses are on a little bit wider lots with deeper backyards, where you can have trees and other things, or put in a pool. And that's what have seen over 30 years. And that's why B, I think that there's some very good things. We don't see that as much. But A, way out there, you have such an opportunity. This we see along 91st. We see in many areas of Peoria that were done in the past 20 to 30 years, all over. Out there, we have some real opportunities to have a little bit bigger houses. They don't have to be on acre lots, but they have to be bigger houses with more opportunities for a better backyard than 15 feet deep will allow.
Fair enough. And Madam Planning Commissioner, I certainly respect your background and history and your appraisal background. So again, I think there's probably a philosophical difference. And certainly if the city as a whole was interested in pursuing that, perhaps it's appropriate to look at what the target densities are for that area and what the zoning districts are that are contemplated for this area. But as a rule, I can tell you that the CC&Rs in a community and the development of a site plan will have as much, if not more, than an impact than the zoning district and the length and width of your backyard. But I appreciate your comments.
Okay?
Thank you.
Commissioner Patterson.
Jason, what's your best guess on the timing for when you'd be ready for a final plat?
Well, Mr. Chair, Mr. Planning Commissioner, I believe in this instance we'd be talking about, it's not just the developments, it's actually the roadway system and some of the infrastructure. So we're probably talking about an 18-month. The plat itself will follow along likely within the next half of a year, but development obviously would occur subsequent to that.
Any other questions for the applicant? Okay, and I just had just a comment about construction on the on lots like this, and I bring this up to a lot of developers in the community. I just want there to be some awareness that there is a lot of times unemployment in the construction sector. It does kind of go in cycles, and you know, we, at least from my perspective, I really, there are resources for developers and contractors and subcontractors to utilize local talent to build within the local community. And I like to see that connection made. It's not a stipulation or anything. I'm just stating that that the resources are there, and I would appreciate developers and contractors and the subs to seek out local resources for manpower.
And Mr. Chair, to that end, something that we do that we think is unique in order to try and attract and make sure that local trades are aware of what's occurring, at least on our pipeline, is we will list within our website the projects that we're working on. Now, not all of them will come to fruition, but hopefully if we're good at what we do, they will. And it should be a resource, and we've never used it as a resource in that regard, but it's probably an excellent resource because we tend to be sort of a leading economic indicator of where there's work. And I'd welcome an opportunity to try and connect our website with folks who may be interested in utilizing it for future employment purposes.
Outstanding, outstanding. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant? Okay, thank you. Do we have any requests to speak? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to go ahead and close the public meeting. Are there any further questions for staff from the board? All right, well, seeing none, I will entertain a motion for item 2R, Z17-32, Haciendas at White Peak. Commissioner Condi.
Mr. Chair, I'm not sure exactly how to make this motion, but so I may need help. I would like to make a motion that it be sent back and have the portion of the lots perhaps revised in what I would say would be the eastern half, and have it brought back in front of the commission at a future date.
Okay, so we have a motion to send C17-32 back to staff to work with the developer. Is there a second on that? Seeing no second, do we have a motion on the original, item?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I move to approve item 2R as presented.
Okay, and that is subject to the conditions outlined in the staff report and the staff memo that was provided? Okay, and we have a motion? And a second to forward item 2R, Z17-32 to the City Council for approval. Please vote. Okay, the motion passes on a 3-to-1 vote. Okay. So we have a request to continue items 3R and 4R to a future meeting date. Do we have a meeting on that? Anybody?
Commissioner Hutchinson, members of the commission, this is just a request for GPA 18-01 and case Z 1802 to be continued to date specific. I believe there was a memo. If the memo was not circulated, we are requesting date specific August 16th, 2018 for the Planning Commission hearing.
Okay, we need a motion to continue that, right? All right, so we have a motion to continue items 3R and 4R to the August 16th meeting.
Commissioner Hutchinson, we'll need two separate motions.
Well, two separate motions, okay. So, all right, item 3R.
I'll make a motion to continue 3R, that's GPA 18-01, to the August 16th meeting.
Okay, we have a motion. And do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to forward 3R to the August 16th meeting. Please vote. Okay, that passes unanimously. And now we need a motion on item 4R, Z18-02.
I'll make that motion to continue 4R, which is Z18-02, continue it to the August 16th meeting.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second again.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second to continue item 4R to the August 16th, 2018 meeting. Please vote. And that motion passes unanimously. We'll see you guys on the 16th, excuse me. All right, that brings us to item 5R. This is a study session on open space. Staff presentation and possible discussion regarding open space requirements within the Peoria zoning ordinance and Peoria design review manual. No action will be taken at this time. Staff.
Thank you, Commissioner, members of the commission. This is item 5R is a study session to talk about the city's open space requirements. There are not any actions to be taken. There's actually not even a proposal to consider modifications to the open space requirements at this time, but rather just to provide information as to kind of how and why we provide open space for single-family residential development primarily, but also how it relates to kind of the larger picture within the city. So a good place to start is the supporting policy documents and ordinances. Listed here on the screen, you see the general plan, the zoning ordinance, design review manual, and the city's infrastructure design guidelines. The last one, the IDG, infrastructure design guidelines, is not handled or enforced by the planning department. It's actually by engineering, but it is certainly a critical component to the open space system within the city. So touching on each of those, there's been a lot of talk lately about the general plan. I think we had a study session here recently about the plan and some of the changes that we're seeing. Just a real quick background, the general plan is a state mandated document that is really kind of the roadmap or maybe even a blueprint. Blueprint is kind of a strange term because that usually has a lot of detail. Blueprints do. The general plan is kind of a big picture document, a guiding document for the city as it moves forward. It's state mandated because of Growing Smarter legislation. There was actually Growing Smarter and Growing Smarter Plus that occurred in 1998 and then again in 2000. I have to look at my general plan expert here. So basically, it mandated the cities of certain sizes have general plans, and what the general plans must be comprised of. Each of those elements, if you will, had to meet certain criteria. And so the general plan is a council-approved and voter-ratified document. It has to be updated every 10 years. It's updated every year, but then is re-ratified by the voters every 10 years. So prior to 2001, which is our first official general plan as required by state statute, we had a comprehensive plan. It's a term that's kind of interchangeable. Across the valley, you'll see a lot of counties, I think, will have your comprehensive plan. Cities will have general plans. But in large part, they're interchangeable in terminology. So we had a comp plan in, I think we had one in 95, we had another one in 98, and then in 2001, Growing Smarter legislation was in effect, and we had to have our first general plan. It was kind of a base document, if you will, but it really did encapsulate our land use, our circulation, recreation elements, and some of those, the key components that we still see today. In 2010, we updated the plan again. It went out to the voters. It was approved. And, again, just furthers more state statute, requirements. This is a living, breathing document that gets updated from time to time. And currently, we're working on the newest iteration, which some of us have, done presentations in front of council, different boards and commissions, to educate the public and everyone on what the general plan does and what it will do. You've probably heard we have 17 elements that we have to respond to. And in terms of open space, you'll see there are some themes throughout many of the sections. And you see them, hopefully they showed up well enough to turn a little different color there for you, yellow. You'll see elements like open space, land use, cost of development, water resources, growth areas, environmental planning, recreation, conservation. These all have kind of this constant theme of open space preservations, amenities, quality of life, and how they're all kind of intertwined. And they're intertwined through goals, objectives, and policies in each of those sections. That a goal would be kind of a big picture aspirational statement. An objective would be maybe there's multiple ways to accomplish that goal, and then the policy will be how each of those objectives should be approached with a little bit more detail. Again, keeping in mind this is a generalized document and does not require a tremendous amount of detail. So in the general plan, there's again those areas that as you look through, and I invite you to certainly to look online. I think each of you have received a copy of the general plan. Some recently, hopefully you've had a chance to kind of flip through it as we've talked about a general plan updates, and you'll see the kind of a recurring theme that is open space, cost of development, amenities, quality of life, kind of the big picture items. And then it brings us to the zoning ordinance. So you have the general plan is kind of the base document, the guiding document, and then you have the zoning ordinance, which is more specific. And when it comes to open space requirements, there's really three main categories in the zoning ordinance that touch open space. It's landscape requirements, the landscape code, most people refer to it as. Then our hillside overlay district, that's for properties, any property throughout the city that is 10% slope or greater. And then there's the Desert Lands Conservation Overlay, and that's properties north of Pinnacle Peak Road that have conservation features. And so those last two, I'm sorry, let me back up a little bit here. So the landscape code, you'll see kind of gives you the upper right-hand corner is a shopping center or office complex. You'll see there's a drainage requirement there. Kind of a swale. You'll see the next picture in residential development along the right-of-way landscaping. Next picture down, that could be either a commercial or residential. Looking by the light, it's probably commercial. But you'll see that this is kind of how we approach open space and infrastructure, and this is by specific requirements. So, for example, a landscape code our landscape code for commercial requires 20% of the net site to be in landscaping. That's just a blanket requirement. And of course, you know, the total square footage of landscaping changes. It's proportional to how big the site is. We have similar requirements for residential development, but I'll touch on the residential a little bit more because there's an extra layer when you get into design review. Then you start to get into, say, the hillside overlay district. This is where we start to do like building envelopes, you know, disturbable areas, you know, areas where we want to keep them natural and protected. We're still allowing development, but it has much more control over it. And then the Desert Lands Conservation Overlay, which is in areas that are subject to these conservation overlay DLCO, it's really just hands off. So in the previous case tonight, there was a lot of wash preservation that was being proposed there. That's really where the DLCO overlay kicks in. So that's the zoning ordinance. Now the design review. This is, again, a document that all new development must go through. Let me caveat that. There are some size restrictions, and I'll touch on that in just a second. So there's three main categories: residential, non-residential, commercial, and industrial, and then there's multifamily. Again, we have open space requirements for each of these categories, but since there's really been some discussion about single-family residential, we have a table in the design review manual that, based on the lot size of your proposal, you have to provide between 5 and 9% open space. So the smaller the lot, the more open space; larger lot, less open space. And so that's kind of the philosophy behind the design review manual, beyond just the built environment. Of course, we're going to look at lighting and materials and colors and site layout and circulation, but a very key component to that, again, and you'll see, you know, how these are all kind of tied together with the general plan through zoning, through design review, is the importance of open space amenities, quality of life for our citizens. And so the open space depends on the type of the project. You know, while we have certainly some strong criteria in the design review manual, it's not as prescriptive as one might think. We do want amenities that are appropriate for the project, and a lot of times those amenities also serve a practical function, such as drainage or stormwater retention, and that's where brings us to the infrastructure design guidelines. So stormwater retention and management is important, of course, to the city. This is when we're talking about solid surfaces and permeable surfaces, we want to make sure we manage the stormwater runoff, the stormwater quality, percolation rates. So you have a retention basin, but you want to make sure that the basin does drain. And so a lot of times you'll see a retention basin that is required by the infrastructure design guidelines that also doubles as a recreational amenity. And so it's kind of a 2-for-1 in that regard. You can see here, these are some pictures of some large capital improvement projects. These are, of course, costly projects, very valuable to the city, but to the extent that we can minimize these, we do so through requiring open space preservation or open space provision early on. And so that's where everything from utility planning to CIP planning is so important. So just a quick summary, and we can certainly open up to discussion, and hopefully I can answer any questions you might have. We always say the city is a complex network of integrated and overlapping systems. So, when we have an open space requirement for a single-family development, let's say, it's not just for the benefit of the residents. It's actually for the benefit of the city, because we want to make sure that we're not creating a need for public infrastructure that is being impacted by private development. There's again, the cost of development element in the general plan, there's a strong push for development paying for itself to the extent that it can. And so once you start to, if you don't require open space, well, that stormwater, for example, has to go somewhere, and that's large storm drains, or it's into rivers and washes, and you don't monitor the water quality, for example, because maybe you can't. And so having these controls in place help complete the whole system. We provide services, of course, safety, amenities, and high standard of living to our citizens. Again, a recurring theme throughout the general plan. Just about every document or master plan that the city has, you're going to see those recurring themes. And then lastly, of course, to minimize the potential for disproportionate cost burdens in the community. Kind of touched on that earlier. That's where if a subdivision wants to come in, they provide their open space, their drainage, because the other option would be public infrastructure, public parks. We start to strain amenities that are publicly funded, and while those are certainly available in some areas, to the extent that we can minimize them, because we want to try to make sure we distribute development costs evenly throughout the city, and to the extent that we can have development, again, pay for itself. So just some thoughts on open space. If they have any questions, we can certainly talk about it. Hopefully that wasn't too rambling
No, Adam, that was actually real pertinent to a lot of the stuff that we consider here, so I do appreciate the.
I do have a quick question. If I remember correctly, I heard natural open space versus a different type of open space.
Commissioner Aluski, yes, there really are two kinds, because we have to give a definition. There's usable open space and there's natural open
Oh,
space.
they're usable, that's what I heard.
Natural open space, though, can be usable, right? You put a trail in it, it's certainly usable. There's value in both. If we sometimes natural open space may be wash corridors or wildlife corridors. Or it may be both a wildlife corridor and a recreational amenity. So yeah, there are two. Usable, commonly when we think about usable, if you look at kind of the second photo in there with the shade structures, that's probably what comes to mind first when we talk about usable open space: turf areas, tot lots, play structures. Yeah, natural can also be revegetation areas. I've got my assistant here that's keeping me in line. I appreciate that. Thanks, Mom.
Okay, any other comments for staff? Okay, well, thank you, Adam. All right, so we will move on to call to the public for non-agenda items. Any calls to the public? Updates from staff.
Just a couple items on the screen here. You'll see that August 2nd meeting is canceled, but we will have an August 16th meeting. There was a continuance of 2 items tonight. Those items will be heard then. There will be others as well. And then finally, behind us over here to my right, your left, sitting next to Sean, is Amanda Beck. She is our new planner. Welcome her to the team. She comes to us from ASU. I hope there are no U of A fans here, because
No,
we like to
I think there are.
brag a little bit. But yeah, so she comes to us from ASU. So in the next few months, you'll be seeing her bring forth some cases, I'm sure. But we wanted to bring her out and show her off a little bit tonight.
Well, welcome, Amanda. Okay.
Oh, and
Oh, what else you got?
I have one item also for August 16th, just as a preview. The packets that you are normally used to are going to be changing quite a bit. So for example, a VIA tonight would be 2 items. On the agenda, it will show up as 1 item with 2 actions. The staff report is now going to be condensed so that everything is comprehensive and it deals with the project from start to finish, from general plan all the way through. So you will see some changes. Hopefully it's more clear, concise, and we've made it definitely easier to use. So we're going to be rolling it out August 16th, and we'll be asking for feedback if you have any suggestions or changes with that. So thank you.
Great. Looking forward to it. Okay. Any other reports from staff? All right, how about from the Planning and Zoning Commission? Any vote? I will have to say, I have to make mention of this, and I've been, if you've been following, you know, and I'll make this very quick, following any of the news out of the East Valley, particular community named Queen Creek, if you ever want to have an appreciation for where we live in the management of our city, go out to Queen Creek, bring a cup with you and put it under a spigot and pour yourself a cup of water. They privatized a lot of their water, and they are in some serious trouble with the public water system there, all being run by for-profit industry. And I really do appreciate, for the most part, our water coming from our public works. I can always depend on turning on the tap and having a clean cup of water in front of me. So I really do appreciate the city we live in and the management of the city, and up, you know, from the top to bottom. And I just wanted to make mention of that today. I've been having some loose dealings with that area, so made me reflect. So, seeing no other reports from the Planning and Zoning Commission, next is adjournment. So I think we're out of here. We'll call this meeting adjourned. Thank you.